Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us for technical session number 6. So this session will be moderated by Shri Pradeep Sridharanji. And the topic of the session, as we all know, is food losses, wastage, and technology to mitigate them. It's a very important topic, I believe. And we have a very good set of speakers here with us today. And I would now request Mr. Pradeep Sridharan to introduce his speakers and move on to the session, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Vibha, and good afternoon to one and all of you. I think I have to tell you that we have an apology, a last-minute one from, one of the speakers, considering the fact that the person has to go through a bit of an emergency, Mr. Chakraborty. So I hope everything is well with him and his family. Not too sure what the issue is, but we will take forward from here. So first of all, very privileged to be part of the session to moderate this topic on food losses, wastage, and technology to mitigate them. I have a interesting format which we are expecting to pursue through the next half an hour to 1 hour time. What we have, the plan is primarily we will have an introduction across the board, and then we will have an initial pitch of a couple of minutes from each one of you on the topic. Then we will get into the session in terms of discussions and deliberations on the topic. So let me start with the introductions part of the story. Let me first introduce Dr. Nachiket Kotwaliwale. Dr. Nachiket, sorry, just a second. Dr. Nachiket is the director of ICAR, Central Institute of Post-Harvest Engineering and Technology, Ludhiana, and responsible to lead research and development in the area of post-harvest engineering and value addition services appropriate to agricultural production catchments and agro-processing industries. Welcome, Dr. Nachiket, to the program.
Thank you.
Next is P. Sudhir Kumar. He is a BE Mechanical from Coimbatore. Mechanical, obviously, close to my heart, primarily because I'm also being a mechanical engineer, and he's a M.Tech in thermal engineering from IIT Delhi. He's the director of marketing in Frick India Limited, one of the leading equipment manufacturing company and turnkey solution provider for all industrial refrigeration applications and special application projects. Having an experience of more than 30 years, has been part of multiple forums as well. Sudhir, welcome on board to the session. Let me introduce Devendra Gupta. Devendra is a co-founder and CEO of EcoZen Solutions Private Limited. He has been managing EcoZen Solutions Private Limited as co-founder and CEO, having more than a decade of multifunctional experience in data analytics, renewable energy, and food technology. Welcome, Devendra. Let me introduce Mr. Ajay Veer Jakar. He's the chairman of Bharat Krishak Samaj, formed in 1955, a non-sectarian, non-political association of farmers advocating for farmer prosperity. As an editor of agriculture magazines like Farmers Forum and Krishak Samachar, targeting farmers, policymakers, and those that influence policy in India. Welcome, Mr. Ajay. I believe Mr. Chandrasekhar is there. Chandrasekhar has been the managing Superb Group as managing partner, having more than a decade of multifunctional experience in management functions like strategic management, business planning, team management, client relationship management, and new market development in India. So that's the list of panelists what we have today. And let me put the context in perspective before I pass on the baton to the people to start their 2-minute pitch onto this conversation. It's a very interesting dimension I want to talk on, where we have in the last 40 years, we know that the earth has lost 1/3 of its arable land from an agricultural standpoint. In the next 35 years, we are expecting the humanity to go by 35%, which means that we have 2 US and 1 China population to add on to the whole thing. With these two dimensions, which are looking at each other starkly, we are today seeing 1.6 billion tons of food wasted globally every year. To look at the weight of it, this is almost like the 4,384 times the weight of the State Empire Building of the US. So you can look at the mammoth size of food which is getting lost. And the cultivatable land which is required for making this food is roughly to the tune of 28 times of the UK. So such a massive loss. Two major dimensions looking at each other, a massive loss happening at the moment. And people say that 25%, if we are able to reuse this one, the malnourished crowd in the world would completely disappear. That's the global phenomenon what we are facing into. While in India, 40% of the food process seems to be getting lost, which is costing the exchequer around 92,000 crores annually. And possibly if we take a state like Bihar, it can feed the entire Bihar for that matter. So that's the larger perspective we have. With that context, I want to open the session, and let me start from the set of people whom we have. We got agriculturists, we got academicians, we got people from the technology side, we have people, all industry veterans with diverse capabilities around here. Let me start with Mr. Ajay Jakan for the introductions and the initial pitch, because I'm sure he will have a very interesting positioning on the whole stuff to know that apart from technology, what other dimensions you believe the food loss and wastage can come through. I think you're on mute.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you can hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. I thank you. I thank the organizers for this opportunity provided to participate on the conference on agro-food processing, and more specifically today on food losses, wastage, and technology to mitigate them. So I'm not an expert on technology for food loss wastage, on technology for food loss wastage, but I also would want to bring into this some perspectives that this conference on agro food processing is not considering, and that also I would want to bring into picture. As you rightly said, that 1/3 of the global food is lost or wasted between farm and plate, and one of the reasons could be that we have long and complex food value chains, which not only increase the risk of fast transmission of foodborne diseases, but also other food-related risks like antimicrobial resistance and food waste. We need to target to reduce the per capita food waste at household levels, at the food service and retail levels by 2030, and that is also one of the SDG goal targets for 12.3. And we need to transition to a circular economy. Now, what does all that mean? It means, I think, that we need to take a larger approach than just food wastage, because as you rightly said, that when you come down to how much area is being utilized to grow the food that is being wasted, we need to redefine what is food. Food is not only what humans are consuming, it is also what animals are consuming. It is even the residue that is left after harvest. We will need to consume that also in a better manner. We will need technology not only for crop residue management like paddy straw, but even you could have farm waste coming out of banana plantations. How do you reuse all this stuff? And I think so we should be talking about not only food waste in an agro-processing, in a conference that deals with agro-processing. We should also be talking about how the food systems are evolving. And the last point I want to give and give the floor back to you is that if you look at the number of hungry people, the number of people with chronic hunger or undernutrition is increasing every year for the last 10 years. Every government, every private sector initiative, multilateral initiative, every financial lever is talking about funding food value chains, about funding food processing. But in spite of that, the number of hungry people are increasing. And the irony of all of it is that most of those who are hungry in the world today, including in India, who are suffering from chronic hunger, are farmers who grow the food. So is the methods that we have used, we're talking about food waste, and food being wasted when it leaves the farm and it reaches the consumer or at the consumer end. But we need to relook at it from scratch. We need to talk about it. Why are producers hungry? Why are consumers obese? Why is this discussion called fork to farm when actually farmers don't grow what they want to grow? Farmers grow what policy dictates them to grow or what consumers demand. So let's widen the scope of this conference from food wastage to other issues of food processing that have not been covered over the last 2 days in this conference. I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Ajay. I think that's very interesting. We would be able to do it. Let me pass that question, the initial piece, to Dr. Nachiket from an academician standpoint. What's your perspective and your initial views into the whole thing, Dr. Nachiket?
All right. Thank you very much, Pradeep, and thanks, Mr. Jakar, for setting the pace. Will I be allowed to share a few PowerPoints? Because whatever you people said, I have a few figures to show to you. And yes, okay. Thank you. So, all right. Is it visible? I hope it is visible.
Yes, it is,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So food loss and waste. This is a perspective on some of the figures I would try to set here. See the term FLW, as we call food loss and waste. This refers to, this is according to FAO, decrease in edible form. I'm not reading it everything, but basically we call it two ways of loss. One is qualitative and another is quantitative. Qualitative losses, as you can see, mostly it depends on what is the ultimate consumption. So sometimes qualitative loss is a loss to consumer, but it is loss, not a loss for industry. So for some other industry, it could be used at times. But quantitative loss is the loss that at present that we have measured to some extent for India. And if we put these figures you said earlier 1.6 billion, so it is somewhere between 1.2 to 2 billion tons of food being lost or not consumed, and which is the waste. Then this is how we can, this is what FAO says, that somewhere around 50%, 30 to 50% is lost. And among the loss is that loss which goes from production to storage and up to, say, to some extent packaging. And after that, it is considered to be a waste where things can be reduced or things can be avoided by the behavior of people. So these are the things about loss. And if you see impact of this is very interesting, some of the things that on the loss, the material that we are losing, almost 23 to 24% of water is used, or other inputs are used for that. And the water footprint of this food loss is somewhere around 250 kilometer cube. That is 7 times the annual water discharge from river Narmada. So this is a huge water loss also. Means it's not only the loss of food, but also loss of other resources like land and water and all other things. And then carbon footprint is there, a lot of carbon footprint. And when this food is dumped, so approximately 25% more harmful to the ozone layer than carbon dioxide, the emission that comes up, the methane emission, because of excessive because of landfills. Coming to India, this is a study that we at CIFET Ludhiana, we conducted across India during 2014. And these are the figures which cumulative, like maximum loss in case of fruits is there, 15.88% in case of guava. And in case of vegetables, the maximum loss is 12.44%, that is in case of tomato. Mind you, this is only quantitative loss. There is no qualitative loss. And this is quantitative loss up to before reaching to the retailer. So there are some other losses when at the level of retailer, there are some other losses at the level of consumers also. And if we come to the monetary value of these losses, so as you said earlier, 92,000 was a figure somewhere in 2014-15. But considering that there is an increase in production and also assuming that some loss reduction might have been taken because of technology intervention now, but still we can roughly say that the total loss is rupees 1 lakh crore per year. Okay. Interestingly, if we see the loss, this loss, if we analyze this, there is the storage period loss is not as much as the loss at the farm loss, which is harvesting loss, collection, grading, packaging, transportation. So these are the activities at the farmer's place or which farmer or intermediary are doing. At that place, the losses are more, especially when we talk of the commodities like fruits and vegetables. So losses have to be curbed at farms. That is my message at here, and later we will talk about other issues also. So at present, I can thank you with saying that we should produce, process and prosper. So primary processing is one of the important key features which Mr. Jakar also touched upon, and we will deliberate on it a little more a little later.
Thank you, Dr. Nachiket. I think Mr. Jakar and yourself has opened up that one very well. we have apart from technology, there is more things to talk about as well. Can I pass it on to Devendra for his initial pitch as well? You're on mute, Devendra, I suppose.
Hello.
Yeah, Devendra, go ahead. Now I can hear you. We all can. No, Devendra, you're again on mute.
Okay, I think it takes a bit of a second before it goes to unmute. So I think the context was very well said by Mr. Chakar and Dr. Nachiket. I think that a lot of data points which he put out are very relevant. Now, I wanted to share one more thing. When we are talking about food loss, we can categorize that into two categories. Say one would be in respect to more staple and more non-perishable commodities, such as cereals and pulses and those. And the second one could be around more perishable commodities, which are fruits, vegetables, and so on. So I think the way we look at food loss in both of them has to be considered differently. While if we talk about cereals and pulses, when we say the food waste at the retail level or at the consumer level, that is actually largely attributed to the way the handling is done at the consumption level. But when you look at the more perishable commodities, the food loss or the food waste which is going to happen at the retail or the consumption is definitely at times originating on the farm itself. How you handle the commodity on the farm is going to not just impact, say, the 20% which Dr. Nachiket showed, but it is also going to impact a large part of the 12% on the retail and the 28% at the consumer as well. Okay, so I just want to reinforce what he said that this needs to really start from the farm in terms of how the activities are happening on the farm per se. So I think in terms of technologies, etc., I think there's a lot which is going on in terms of enabling these aspects. Another thing I would want to also highlight is, apart from the quantitative aspect, we should also look at the loss of value of commodity. Say, if something is not getting consumed, it is definitely a loss. Okay, but if, say, something could have been sold by a farmer or a retailer for, say, 60 rupees a kg, if it is selling for 10 rupees a kg, according to me, that is a loss. It doesn't mean that if it is sold for 10 rupees a kg, it is not lost. You've lost 50 rupees per kg worth of value, and that should also reflect in the 1 lakh crore that Dr. Nachiket was highlighting, because the loss of value is the one which is most important, and it should be the sole metric we focus on when we are evaluating the impact of food loss. So, because when we look at the way the perishables are handled today, say if somebody is growing custard apple in Saswad area near Pune, okay, it is very likely that a lot of those people would be growing custard apple in that region. And there is like an overproduction. Like Mumbai and Maharashtra consumes probably 70 to 80% of that. And we get custard apples at throwaway prices. But the rest of the country, the custard apples are not really able to reach because of lack of proper supply chain solutions, because of lack of proper sorting and grading methods, availability with the farmers. I think a large part of aggregators are the ones who ship it up through flight to Kolkata and Delhi and other markets. So I think what is important is to also realize that if the custard apple is getting consumed only in Maharashtra at a lower value, okay, and the whole country is not able to access it, I would also perceive that as a loss of value for the producer. So I think with my initial remarks around the food loss and the how do we really go about defining food loss differently for perishables and non-perishables, and what are the aspects we should consider as a part of the food loss. And I feel processing is also something which requires the right kind of handling, the right kind of selection and grading and sorting to get the right processed product. So if that is not happening as well, it could also lead to loss even after the processing is done. So I think this is the gamut of food loss is what I would like to also add in terms of a dimension. Yeah.
Thanks, Devendra, for that. Sudhir, from passing on the baton to you for your initial remarks.
Thank you. I'm coming from the other side, technology, how technology can be used to minimize the loss. But I would like to say that, thank you, Pradeep, for this opportunity. But I would like to say, for the last 30 years, when I started as a trainee engineer, we used to talk that food wastage is 30 to 35%. And even after 30 years, we still say that 30 to 35%, even though we have put in a lot of cold storages. You will be surprised to note that now India has got cold storage space more than the US. So one is we should be happy that our production of food is also increased, even though the cold storage are available. But I feel that the major drawback is how we handle it and how we bring it to the cold storage. That is the major area where the food is getting wasted. And of course, there are two types, as everybody, Nachiket and Devang said, there are two types of losses. One is the harvesting and initial stage losses from the farmer to the processor, and the other one is at the consumer side and the retailer side. The retailer side and the consumer side loss, that cannot be avoided, because that is only thing is you need to have your own common sense. Like if you fill a plate more than what you can eat and you put it on a dustbin, so that is a loss which can be avoided. Whereas the loss which can be avoided is in the pre stages, like when you harvest, handle, how you pack it, and how you transport it, how you store it, then give it to the retail. Here is where the losses can be reduced. And we have now technology. So the government is also coming out with a lot of incentives to start cold storages at village levels, district levels, and farm levels. So this technology is available. Only thing is some more studies need to be done how to do it at the farm level. Before it reaches the cold storage, you get this wastage is happening more. So that needs to be stopped. And also the other thing is processing. If there is excess production, we need to look at processing also, because we are more prone to eating fresh foods. We don't eat processed foods. So that is the reason the value is more for fresh foods. So to try to store it in fresh condition. But if there is excess production, we can process it and also do it. I have a small presentation. Maybe during the course of the next my talk, I will give you how it can be reduced.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhir, for that one. Last but not the least, Chandra, can I pass it on to you for your opening remarks, please?
Yeah, hi. I was quite impressed by what Devendra said about loss of the value of the food, and when it comes to the value, like when he said that when it is sold at 60 rupees and then the selling value comes down to 10 rupees. Okay, there is a loss of 50 rupees. Here comes the technology in between, and how the loss can be reduced, not directly with the food, but the end producer can result this and convert this into and mitigate this loss. We had been discussing with a lot of farmers and a lot of producing companies, food producing companies, where this losses happens due to improper storage, due to improper handling. And this could be then, we normally suggest them to go for a biodigester, that is to convert them into a biogas, which could be used from waste to energy. They can use their captive energy to run their own processes, and that particularly results into another revenue generation for them. So indirectly, the end use of this food loss goes into a waste to energy model. So that is what we normally had been doing till date.
All right. Okay, that's very interesting to have the technology people really believing that technology can solve the problem. I come from a technology background as well, so I'm sure I may probably think in similar lines. But let's hear that from the people who are looking into the non-technology dimension plus the academicians part of his story. My first question to you, Dr. Nachiket, we have Sudhir mentioning about processed food. There is a view that everyone eats processed food for that matter. Processing could be even cooking in a different context. So let me try to put this view into you. Is that possible? What is the necessity of a processed food? Do we really require a processing food? That's one question. And the second part is that what do you think are the major reasons of food wastage in India, particularly when we say that the loss is largely not on the plate but on the post-harvest, and you are an expert in the thing. So if you can club these questions and probably give us some insights, that would be really great.
All right, thank you. Yeah, as far as processing is concerned, when we use the word food processing, everybody thinks that the processing means only the high value products, something like if we are talking of food grains, then they will consider breads and biscuits and bakery items. And otherwise, the first thing that comes into the mind is the fruit and vegetable processing. But frankly speaking, we have been doing processing. So just a general term saying in general term that in India we don't process foods is a very wrong. Yes, we are not processing fruits and vegetables because we Indians are more habitual of eating fruits and vegetables fresh. But otherwise, food grains, oilseed, pulses, all these things, we are processing because we cannot consume those foods without processing. So processing is taking place, but the issue is at what losses occur during that processing. That is also another issue that we are addressing, and how much energy is required to process those foods. So those are the two other issues that we are also looking at this institute. And there are losses during processing also in fruits, vegetables, as well as food grains and so many other processing commodities. So losses are there. And one of the major reasons for losses is dismal primary processing. At the farmers level, farmers don't even, many times they don't even clean or grade the material, which can be done using very ordinary machineries or very ordinary methods. Just employing some people also, it could be done. So very dismal primary processing, and mind you one thing, any loss in the value chain of food chain cannot be made up at a later stage. So if something is lost, then it is lost. If quality aspect is lost, then it is lost. You cannot make it up. So that is one of the issues that the loss perceives. In Hindi, there is a saying, "Ek gandi machli pure talab ko ganda karti hai." So similarly, a rotten fruit also rots the basket, right? So similarly, a rotten grain also rots the whole sack. So you can say that way. So primary processing at the farmer's level, even the basic thing like cleaning, grading, or drying and all those things, they have to be done. They have to be performed. At times, farmers do not dry things thinking that weight will reduce. But because of that, the material is getting lost and wastage is happening. Then inadequate infrastructure for handling and storage. That is another issue, which is a reason for all these losses. Inappropriate machines and systems for harvesting, threshing, cleaning, washing, all these unit operations which are taken place at primary level. So the machines which are being used, sometimes they are inappropriate. You are using something for something else, and you are or you are not using it at appropriate stage or appropriate method. Then, of course, I touched upon lightly that the lack of sensitivity and awareness among the farmers or that commodity handling people. They think a little bit of loss doesn't make any difference. So say 1% or 0.5%, they say it doesn't matter. But when you add it up, it becomes a huge loss. And then the technology that we are talking, some of the high-ended technology is very expensive. And once a user gets to know that this is a technology, let us say cold storage or any kind of technology we are talking, if you tell the price of this technology, they immediately get running away from that, saying that it is very expensive. So there has to be a mechanism that this type of technology is within the reach of the farmer. So it is not only the technological issue, but also the management issue of the whole chain management issue. And I think I will stop it here on this question. and we will take others' perspective on this.
Thanks, Dr. Nachiket. That's helpful. I mean, let me extend that question further to Mr. Jacker. In your initial remarks, you mentioned regarding, apart from technology, there are very many dimensions to the whole thing, and you had a very interesting piece to the whole thing regarding the food evolution. And if you look at what Dr. Nachiket mentioned, he talks about, is there a, apart from the technology, do you think there is a awareness requirement, more sensitivity issues around the whole thing? Any other policy related activities which is required? Why and how we can have the farmers end produce can be protected? How that could be protected? That could be a great insightful point from your side if you could touch on that point, Mr. Ajay. Mr. Ajay? Ajay, can you hear us, please? Yeah. I think you possibly, we are not able to hear you, Ajay. We're still struggling to hear you.
You need to unmute Ajay. No, I think so.
Yeah, he needs to unmute himself. Or now he has unmuted.
Yeah. No, we're struggling.
No, maybe you can move on to the next speaker.
Okay, Ajay, I think that we will give you a bit of a break to fix the technical glitch.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes,
Okay.
please go ahead. Yes.
I'm not technology savvy, as I said initially, and that's why you could not hear me. But I think, so sorry for wasting everyone's time on this, but I think we need to motivate and empower consumers to make informed choices. And there are things that can happen that can move us in this direction. One is we need civil society driven mechanisms to mobilize people, consumers, and voters to demand healthy, sustainable food. Also, make people aware, not only farmers, but even consumers aware. So they put pressure on the system. How can investor driven mechanisms of shareholders disinvesting in organizations where social impact assessments need to be done? Like shareholder activism is also important. We have seen it in the West where they're moving companies to become environmentally sustainable. So those could also be used. The government could decide on how to use its financial measures like taxation or subsidies, not subsidize things which promote food waste, but subsidize technologies which can be used on the farm. When I was very small, when I was in school, we used to have a refrigerator at home which would work on kerosene. And this was like 40 years ago, I think. Now, when you talk about technology today, we are talking about technology interventions which basically come in a very large scale. But I think today also there needs to be investment. We need technology in gobar gas, let's say gobar gas running refrigerators or some small farm level equipment. We don't have those kinds of investments coming in. No companies are doing it. I think so there's a huge demand for it. But basically we need to invest behavioral change, and that's very important. We need to make sure that farmers get a better price. And if grading is also done properly, like it was mentioned, like, एक मछली पूरे तालाब को गंदा कर देती है. If grading is done properly, I think a lot of food wastage could come to an end without huge investments. And these grading machines are something that have to be set up by the public sector. We should not also expect private sector. I mean, we should not expect the government to abdicate on its responsibilities. When the central government has come up with this agriculture infrastructure fund for 1 lakh crore rupees, I remain skeptical of the whole idea. First of all, you're giving loans to the private sector. And to the best of my estimation, not even 20% of that money is going to be dispersed over the next 5 years. And we need to make sure that government does not abdicate its responsibilities and shift them to the private sector to deliver, because private sector will not be able to deliver. Private sector can work hand in hand where government investments are coming in. So for both, there's a push and pull approaches. We need to make sure that we work together with them. But behavioral change is something we need to invest in from the time children are in school, not to waste food when they get food in the tiffins, on how to use community spirit. This is what we need to do. And we need to invest, lastly, in wet markets, in small census towns. We need to invest in wet markets, and we need to get farmers markets in bigger towns, in metropolitan towns, where farmers can get their fresh produce directly to consumers. That will also reduce the value chain. It's not necessary that wastage will reduce because we do processing. A lot of wastage may not be required if we can actually make sure that we can connect farmers to consumers by investing in radically different approaches which require just spaces for farmers to sell their produce. And there's even this concept, if you look at Delhi and Bombay and other places, which we are following the same, we are following the same system that is happening in the West, where the rich are not buying ugly looking food. They want pretty looking fruits, they want pretty looking vegetables. And that's also a mentality issue, and we need to focus on behavioral change. That's what I would focus on. Thank you.
Know you the West activities wherein which you have the rich doesn't buy the premium looking or the ugly looking fruits for that matter. We have seen in the West wherein which you have prices being marked down fundamentally when for fruits or vegetables which are looking a bit ugly, and these are displayed in the huge stores and things like that, marked down prices. But do you think that as an policy making supporting organization, would you be considering those kind of measures to be put across the government machinery or through the private machineries?
So I just to tell you, there is a United Nations Food System Summit happening in September of 2021. It's an initiative of the United Nations. It has 4 tracks where work is happening. One of them is on nutrition. One of them is on consumption and food waste. And the third is on production, the fourth is on climate and resilience, and the fifth is on equity and livelihoods. So I am the vice chair of the United Nations Food System Summit Track 2 on sustainable consumption and food waste. So the topic that you're discussing, we're exactly working on that at the system. And I'm privileged, and it's a great responsibility because I'm the only farmer in the world in this whole UN Food System Summit. Everybody else comes from nutrition organizations like GAIN, CARE, and WHO, and all other organizations. So this is what you are asking is not only required in India, but it requires a different approach to this. But one of the things that I could leave to the other panelists is that why aren't farmers trying to preserve, why aren't farmers using better practices on the farm? Like it was said, if farmers harvest it better, if they do not put it on the ground, if they put it on a plastic sheet, and if they pack it nicely in crates. For example, I grow citrus, So if you cut the citrus when you harvest it, if you cut it with a little stem sticking out from the fruit, it does not get spoiled easily. Its shelf life increases. And then when you pack this citrus into a box, if one of the sticks pokes into the other citrus, then it spoils the whole box by the time it reaches Chennai. So these things, if you want the farmers to do, then we need to change policies on affordable food for consumers. Till farmers don't get the right cost of growing food, they are not going to be adopting practices which are environmentally sustainable or will reduce food waste, because they do not have that bandwidth to give that extra time, space, and little money that is required. It may seem very little for the industry, but it's a huge amount when farmer livelihoods are concerned. So it's a systems approach where you got to make sure that farmers get a better price, and how economic models work on affordable food and real cost of food. I think so everything is linked. It's far more complex than what I can articulate and explain at the moment.
All right.
Sometimes we also get lost.
All right. Thanks for that one. That's very, very helpful to hear that one. Let me come to Sudhir with a bit of an interesting question. If you hear Mr. Gadkari has been talking about the amount of money the government is putting across, and possibly, things about probably 20% may not even be sent across, handled by the public or the private sector in terms of driving in. You coming from a private sector segment, and the storage seems to be, as you mentioned, the storage in India, especially the coal logistic chains are supposed to be bigger than US at this point in time. What is the present status of the storage infrastructure, and what do you think are the requirements considering the production what we are facing? Because there is a large belief that the productions are way higher than what we require, and significant amount of food is getting wasted, probably to the size of the wheat production in Australia is getting wasted in India for that matter. So what's your sense around the whole thing, Sudhir? You're on mute.
Yeah. Now I would like to share my presentation so that I can show it visually, like where we are lagging behind. Can I share content, please?
Yeah. Over to you, Vibha. If you could help him, please.
Well, you have an access, Mr. Sudhir Kumar. You can run it from your system.
Yeah. Is my screen visible?
No, not yet.
No.
Is it visible?
No.
I didn't get that share screen icon.
Yeah, you can you see, just down below the screen, you can see that share
Yeah,
button?
now I got it. Now I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now can you see the screen? Hello?
No, not yet. No. Are you able to see your screen, the presentation that you want to show?
Yeah.
Press the share button.
Yeah. I press the share button and I'm able to see it now.
No, you have to press the share button and you have to click on the presentation icon. Did you click that?
Presentation icon twice, yeah.
Presentation icon.
Directly on the presentation.
Rohit, now we can see your screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can come to the presenter's mode so that we can see the full screen.
Yeah, now you're seeing?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll just take 2 minutes to just show what is the this. As Mr. Nachiket said, there are a lot of stages of losses, but the most important loss is the harvesting and collecting, and also the grading part we were discussing. The major important thing is pre-cooling. Pre-cooling is what we are lagging behind. Even though I said we are good at cold storage capacities, we are not good at pre-cooling. Like once it is harvested at the farm level, to transport it to a cold storage. So we don't have that pre-cooling at farm levels. Whereas internationally in Europe and US, you have farm pre-coolers, some small village will have pre-cooling things. So you need to have the pre-cooling part. Next is the refrigerated transport. In India, we don't do a refrigerated transport. All the perishable commodity like fruits, vegetables, even an apple which is being transported from Shimla to Chennai does not come in a refrigerated transport. They just transport it in a normal truck, So there is where the quality of the product is getting lost. And similarly, after we do keep it in the cold storage, again, the cold chain has to be maintained. So that is not being maintained. One such industry which is really doing well is like in the perishable thing, I would like to highlight on the milk part. The milk industry, they have formed a lot of cooperatives, and each village will have a collection center and will have a rural milk cooler or a bulk milk cooler where the milk is cooled immediately, and afterwards it is transported in a insulated vehicle where the temperature is maintained, and it is transported in an insulated transport to the milk processing center. Similarly, we need to do it for the perishable commodities also. You have to pluck it, as Mr. Ajay said, you have to pluck it with a stem, and then you need to pack it in a proper sponge or maybe in a small carton box. And typically, as he rightly said, the farmer is not interested until he gets a value for this product. Don't think I'm going politically, but if the multinationals come into buying it directly from the farmers, then they will definitely give them the infrastructure, how to pack the food and how to transport the food. So those things. So basically, I'm just showing a chart where the chain has to be maintained. Like if you have a green cold chain, then you can have the delivery of the produce throughout the year, reduce the losses, reduce the wastage, and also use natural refrigerants to use the global warming effect. So I will not take much of the time, but I'm just showing you how the products are graded. It can be also go to the processing where it can be frozen and also can be rates. And we have good facilities. Now technology has improved. As Mr. Ajay was saying, I think kerosene refrigerator, now we have good type of storage systems. But still, we have basically one thing which we are lagging behind is we are commodity specific cold storages. Like in India, if it's a cold storage, it's mostly potato cold storages. It is mostly potato cold storages, and maybe if you go down south, it is for red chilies or it is for tamarind and maybe some amount for apples. We don't have cold storage for fresh vegetables. We don't have for keeping a cauliflower or for keeping a tomato or even the biggest commodity like onion, which always has a price fluctuation. We don't have infrastructure in onion cold storages, which we need to improve upon. So there are cold storages for potato, apples, etc., oranges, but we need to have for other high value commodities, because I think Devendra will vouch with me, like strawberries are grown in Mahabaleshwar, but I don't find a lot of cold storages to store strawberries everywhere. You don't have that much of infrastructure to store. He mentioned an example of custard apple. So you need to have specific product, specific temperature chain and cold chain. Cold chain is important. How you transport. Transport is where we are also lagging behind. I think with this, I again give it back to Pradeep. I think I've given some inputs where we are lagging behind and where we are surplus.
Thanks, Sudhir, for that one. Obviously, we extended that conversation to this point on cold chain and storages. Let me pass it on to Devendra. It's very interesting to note, people say that, for example, apart from the cold chain, from a preservation standpoint, we see globally there are new technologies coming in, wherein which, for example, there are people used to use waxing on fruits and vegetables to make it look better and probably to make it slightly more having better longevity. There are natural remedies which are coming in, like the peel of the grape is actually used as a coating. A company called, if I remember correctly, called APEDA does that one in the US, which helps in terms of ensuring that the longevity of fresh vegetables and fruits goes to another a week plus for that matter. So there are more technology driven things which are coming up. So my question to Devendra is that apart from the traditional storages which we have, which has been spoken by Sudhir and the rest of the panelists, cold storages, etc., which come, what are the other methods you see in the industry which helps in terms of with technology intervention or otherwise to make sure that we are able to reduce the food losses?
I think really sorry you have to do that for all of us. But I must say that the topic has gotten very interesting. I think before I really jump onto your question, if you could allow me for a minute, I just wanted to share, what was mentioned by Sudhir, what was mentioned by Ajay as well. So Ajay mentioned that farmers today are not willing to follow the required practices, okay, unless they are kind of getting paid more. Okay, I think that is one particular very important point which Ajay highlighted. Also, Sudhir mentioned about the importance of cold chain rather than cold stores. Okay, so I just want to take a second and maybe talk about both of these. So what, in our experience, what we have seen is that the farmers today are tending to hand over the commodity to the trader, and they hand it over to them at the source. The whole field is bought off, and the harvesting is also done by the aggregator, and they are out of the risk of the commodity handling and everything. So now when that is the kind of an approach, the farmer is not really concerned about what happens to the commodity once it reaches the end consumer. They get their money at the farm level itself. So if they have an incentive that you can also take your commodity to further markets, and you can also get a better price for your commodity, that is when the farmers are likely to be taking that kind of a risk and putting in practices in place, is what we have seen. Because when you're working with lychee farmers in Bihar and trying to take their lychee to Bangalore using cold chain, we saw that the farmers are willing to do it once we pass them the upside. So we said, if you get a higher price in Bangalore, we'll pass that upside to you as well. So we saw a complete transformation on the field amongst the farmers. So that is one thing I wanted to share. Now, another very important aspect is that the cold stores are cold chain is construed as cold stores in India. And that is like one of the very big challenges. So you mentioned about these different technologies. Some are hormones, some are coatings. All of these together have to work. What are we essentially trying to do is we are trying to modify the air quality, the air temperature, the concentration of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and ethylene, which the fruit comes in contact with. If these 6 parameters are addressed and managed properly, hello, am I audible?
Yes,
You are.
Devendra, you are very much audible.
Yeah. So if these 6 parameters are managed, you can manage a commodity for a very long time. And we have heard about, like if you take out the commodity from the cold chain, it starts to perish very fast. So I would like to highlight, the importance of packaging over here. If we are using the right kind of packaging, which will maintain the right kind of modified atmosphere, or maybe the coatings that you mentioned, there are few other startups which have come in, like one of them is Green Pod, which is making something innovative. If you put in as a hormone, it will keep it fresh. Okay. There's another packaging company called Keep It Fresh, which is doing good work in terms of packaging solutions to ensure that the moisture content inside doesn't go up and it doesn't go down as well. So these kind of technologies are available, which will maintain the quality of commodity in the cold chain as well. Also, in terms of new technologies, I think there was a lot of stress given around the farm level grading, sorting, and the losses over there. I think Ajay also highlighted about the grading and sorting machines. Okay, I feel it is very important that these aspects are really brought to the farm level and farmers really get the incentive to take the commodity to these distant markets or to the end markets and are actually getting that particular price. I feel that is when the incentivization to install such kind of systems will come. There are startups like Intello Labs, Sickle, who have brought in image processing based technologies wherein you can do kind of a sorting or grading using a cell phone. That is not operationally scalable yet, though it is able to give you a good indication. If you can allow me to share my screen for a second, I will just show you some snippets of those kind of technologies.
Rohit, can you give access to Mr. Devendra Gupta? Okay, you have the access, Mr. Gupta?
Yes, I have the access. So this is an example of the quality app wherein we are educating the farmers as to what kind of a lychee they should pack and what kind of lychee they should not pack. Okay. Then there is this app wherein you click a picture of pomegranate. Okay, and this set, and it tells you what are the aspects involved in the pomegranate just by analyzing the image through image processing. Okay, so this is like the new technologies which are getting built while the existing sorting rating machines take like a fruit by fruit and do that and are capital intensive. If we are able to figure out a way to operationalize these technologies to enable farm sorting and grading in a proper manner, I think that could be a big game changer in reducing the loss of these commodities. The person will separate the produce. The bad produce will not spoil the good produce, because if you put the bad and good together, the bad one tends to spoil the good as well. Okay. Now coming to the last point in terms of the technology.
Mr. Gupta, could you please use the presenter's mode?
Okay, is it not visible?
It is, but the screen is very small. So if you could use the other mode, then we can see the full screen. Now it's better. Thank you.
Okay, so I was showing this screen earlier, wherein by clicking a picture of a set of pomegranate, you could actually tell as to what is the issues with that lot of pomegranate. Now, this is challenging to implement on the field today because it's 5 tons of produce. It becomes a very big challenge. Okay, and this is another way to do the quality management on the field itself. Okay, wherein you guide the farmer, you create awareness that this is the requirement which the buyer really has. Now, I think I want to go and maybe talk about just 2 more points before I hand it over back. So when we do not have pre-cooling near the farm, what essentially happens is the farmer is forced, or the trader aggregator is forced to sell the commodity in the vicinity for very perishable or more perishable produce. And they would send it to markets which are 300 kilometers away or so. And let's say if you enable them with a pre-cooling on the farm, they can go in a normal truck to distances around 600 kilometers, 700 kilometers without use of a refrigerated truck itself. And we have seen this happening in certain commodities and working beautifully over there. It does not work for certain of them, for sure, of course. And if you have access to refrigerated trucks, you can take it to whichever market you really want to. Now, if this model is so awesome, why hasn't it scaled up so far? Are pre-coolers not available? Pre-coolers are available. There is challenges around access to energy and all of that. But the return which you will get by going to a farther market is like really crazy. We are seeing coriander is selling for 60 rupees in Bangalore, while it is selling for 180 rupees wholesale in Delhi. So if you can take your coriander from Bangalore to Delhi, there is a phenomenal profit of 50, 60 rupees per kg that you can make. So why is it not happening? What is happening is that farmers are not enabled as to how to pre-cool the coriander. If they pre-cool it directly, it leads to shriveling of coriander and it gets spoiled. That is one area where they face a challenge. The second area is that the pre-coolers are not so very well available. Okay. And the third aspect is aggregating a truckload full of coriander, which is say around, if you're sending a 32-feeder, it would fill around 3.5 tons of coriander. Aggregating that much coriander is itself a big challenge. It's a big operation on the farm level itself. So that is why this cold chain is not taking off. Because of this, on the supply side, you have to work to generate that much volume of sourcing. And then if you're sending it to Delhi, then great, because Delhi has higher volumes. But if you send it to a Lucknow, which is like 7 tons daily, the whole market will crash. Okay, so these are some of the challenges which these technologies really need addressed to be able to actually go to scale. But yes, I think we are really passionate about a lot of these issues. And we feel that if we are able to figure out a part-load logistics solution to take the fruits and vegetables, etc., in a fresh condition to farther markets, it will ease out the supply side issues. It will ease out the demand side issues as well. Because if you're sending 300 kgs, it would be very easy to supply and also to generate demand for the same. So I think in overall, in terms of technology, we are seeing a lot of traction coming around cold chain, renewable energy applications around it. We are seeing a lot of applications around part load logistics becoming very important. We are seeing quality assaying near the farm level becoming very useful. And also just a couple of more things in terms of better supply and demand data. So today, if we look at the data as to what is the prices in different markets, what are the arrivals in different markets, there are only 2 or 3 mandis wherein you get authentic data in the country. So if you're able to get this data better, I think that is one area wherein the technology is, some startups are working and it could help. And also in terms of estimating the supply and demand better, in terms of what is the production that is anticipated to be and what is the demand that is anticipated to be. If you're matching these two well, then that solves this whole problem of food loss in the first place itself to some extent. So I think with that, I will hand it back. Sorry for the long conversation.
All right, thanks, Devendra, for that one. I have a question to Mr. Jacker on the back of this one. Ajay, these people have been talking about in the panel regarding the technologies, for example. And we all know that there are important, very cutting-edge technologies which are coming on the back of AI, on the back of ML across farmers, shops, restaurants, houses. We have enough a number of names in the market. If you look at, you will see people like Hungry Harvest, Full Harvest, Hazel Technology, a lot of players, cutting-edge technology part of the story. My first question to you on that backdrop is that in India, even the mildest of technology interventions, something like an irradiation, which started in 94s, early 90s, there is no confidence in people in terms of even using these technologies, is the general belief. What's your view around it? Is that technologies become an impediment or is that a behavioral issue? What is the challenge there?
I think on this point, I'll completely disagree with you.
Right.
I think farmers are most receptive to new technologies. An industry will never adopt a new technology till they don't pilot it. Farmers will like an idea and they will jump at it, they will adopt it. If it fails or works, they're so used to taking risks, and they're dependent on whether that they are very receptive to technologies. And if technologies have not caught on, it is because of lack or of commitment of the government. For example, you talked about irradiation. I think there's a plant for irradiation for onions in Nasik or someplace, or Pune or something. Why hasn't the government put up more plants? You don't expect private sector to put up 5 crore plants for irradiation. The government has to put up those plants. The problem that I was trying to define
Sorry
earlier
to interrupt.
was,
I think the plant is also closed, Ajay. Sorry
okay,
to interrupt. The plant is also closed.
so you can't blame farmers for closing that plant. It's a government plant. But anyway, coming back to the point that what else is required other than technology? Technology is available. It's not that technology is not available. More technology is coming onto the play, and we welcome new technology. But the problem is that nobody is making a process of how the technology will be utilized, how it will be put on ground, how it will be used. And that is the same problem we are facing with these 3 farm acts that are being opposed by farmers today, is that there was no process of consultation with the states and farmer organizations. And that is what has primarily led to the opposition and the acts being made in a way that once the prime minister had to intervene, he's amended those acts, he's amending those acts. So it's the process that is missing. And if we take to food processing industry, because this is what we're focusing on here, you look at the food parks. The food parks have been designed, hundreds of crores of subsidies and support has been given by state governments and central governments to put together. Name me 5 food parks which are successful in the country. Forget 5, name me 3 food parks which are successful in the country, which don't have a captive utilization like Patanjali has. You know, independent food parks, the very concept did not take off the way it could have taken off. So I'm saying the fine print is missing. When a food park policy was designed, the industry was not consulted. When farm acts are designed, are made, farmers are not consulted. So not only on the technology, we need to focus on the process. We should not be fixated on the outcome that we need to process food. We must have a process to decide why we need to process food, what we need to process. Different circumstances, different regions will have different points. And the last point I want to put here, there's another dimension that is coming up. You will find more of it in the news next year, is data. Now, data that's being collected from the farms because of Aadhaar linkages to your land, because of PM Kisan transfer of money that's happening, because of farm loan waivers. I mean, all sorts of, because of what you're marketing, government is collecting all this data. Now, how is the government going to use this data? Is the government going to monetize it by giving it to a few private players? As a farmers organization and as a farmer, I think that is absolutely wrong. It is like daytime robbery. And these are issues that need to be tackled before, rather than we grumble and crib about it when everything has been lost. Amazon, Alibaba, Google, Microsoft, all of these are basically data harvesting companies, and they use technology to harvest their data. Now, should that data be given to these companies to become bigger, to become oligarchs that will then control the food policy space? I don't think so. So these are also issues that, as a food processing industry, as a food value chain we discussed, these are issues that cannot be kept out of the table. And I would suggest to the organization holding this program, Agrovision, to look at these programs beforehand rather than become problems afterwards. Thank you. Sorry for taking the discussion away from food wastage, but it's in a food systems approach, it's very difficult to just focus on one topic if you don't take a larger picture of things that's happening.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ajay. I completely agree with your approach, and the perspective is great, and you're very, very passionate about that point. You know, data is the new oil, so definitely data is going to be used across the world in the right manner. And now, obviously, the government is also trying its best to have the right sort of measures in terms of data protection as well.
I'll just interrupt. I'll give you an example of data. Agriculture machinery companies like John Deere and all the bigger companies in America collect data on precision farming equipment when precision farming is done. If you don't service that machinery from the company, they refuse farmers access to their own data that's been collected from their farm. You know, what bigger highway robbery is there than that? And if private company is not ready to give us data on what they're buying and selling, why should farmers' data of what I own and not own be given to a company to market their produce at me? You know, so even if food processing sector has to improve and technology has to come in, we need to develop our institutions better, antitrust institutions, and all these. And I know, let's say, Food Safety Authority needs to improve substantially. For example, I'm in Punjab, and I'll give you an example on food safety, and this actually has an impact on food wastage. We only have one laboratory in Punjab where you can actually take a sample of a milk and get it tested and it is legally valid to file a case against a violator. If 20%, if there's a general feeling that 15 to 20% of the milk that's available in India today is adulterated. Now, if we can have a technology to stop adulteration, there will be higher demand for milk. It will help in farmers realizing a better price. It will help consumers having better health. And that will also help in food processing and reducing wastage, because better value will be generated for the produce. So everything has a linkage. And I think these are points. Sorry for interrupting you, but I just thought we must put that up front here.
Absolutely. Just being conscious of time as well, Jakhar, I'm going to move that question slightly into Dr. Nachiket. Now, from an academic standpoint, food mapping is something which we have seen, as a compelling mechanics around the globe, and specifically in developing countries. From an academic standpoint, Dr. Nachiket, how do you look at this one? I mean, do you think food mapping is a great way of looking into it? There are government mechanics which has been put in place policy-wise, that is thinking-wise. What's your insights into that? Would that be of value to food wastage mitigation?
As far as mapping is concerned, or as we call it, traceability of a food, from consumer point of view and from curbing of wastage, it could be used. It could be used, and it could be also giving you information that what are the weak points in the chain which need to be addressed. As everyone is telling again and again that we have to see the whole chain. It's so mapping or traceability is going to give you information on the chain, complete chain, and wherever there are losses occurring, that can be addressed. So yes, mapping has a important role which can be played, but at the same time, when we are talking of these type of systems, what Mr. Jakhar is pointing out about the data being exchanged from this place to that, and a lot of different technologies being handled. So that will always be questioned, and it has to be again found out that this has to be a fail-safe and foolproof kind of technology.
All right. Okay, sure, absolutely. Understand that. Devendra, let me pass this question to you, because I think you've been talking maybe to Sudhir. I mean, Sudhir has been not been in the picture for some time. So let me ask this question, because you come from the cold storage part of the story, cold chain. There's a study which has come from Maersk, which talks about saying the refrigerator products are, really going to be at the higher side, an increase of potential around 19 to 20% expected from 2017 to 2022. And you're also aligning to the same thinking, and it also drives into your business. Do you think that refrigeration is one of the key models in terms of ensuring that the loss of food wastage could be mitigated, or is there anything else you consider? What are the new trends in those ones?
Hello.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. Refrigeration is definitely the need. But only thing is, you need to know at what temperature it needs to be stored. Like in a normal refrigerator, we dump everything into a refrigerator, whether irrespective at what temperature it needs to be stored. Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, so it's basically a refrigeration at the right temperatures. You need to know what product to be stored at what temperature, and that will be more helpful in the thing. But also there is a myth that fresh products are good and refrigerated products are not good. That's not the case. You can preserve all the nutrients and everything as equivalent to a fresh, if a proper cold chain and a temperature management is done. So I would definitely say refrigerators and refrigeration is going to be the mantra. Like people in the cities are now started using processed foods and also refrigerated foods. So it is going to be the next thing in the industry. Yeah, Devendra, you need to add something? You can add.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Bang on in terms of the protocol, Sudhir. I think, yeah, I think packaging is something, and the quality grading on the before entering the cold chain. I think if these two things are being done well, I think the refrigeration technology can really help avert food loss and food waste both.
Okay. All right. Let me go back to Mr. Jacker. I think it's a very interesting to have this conversation, Mr. Jacker. Now we talk about one side, the technology part of the story, the government interventions which are potentially not being that helpful. Possibly like the engagements are not there, or the confidence building measures necessarily requires more. The farmers are ready to experiment, but many a times the interventions are not working through. So from a storage standpoint, and storage as well as waste management standpoint, one side is the farmers part of the story, which is essentially having these challenges. But post the farmers part, I mean, because I know that that's your sweet spot. I'm moving from the sweet spot to the rest of it. Now, when it comes into the plate part of the story, or towards the shop and the restaurants and things, the end part of the story, how do you think that wastages could be potentially covered as well? Because that's also reasonably substantial.
I see if you look at trends in the world, restaurants are not buying fresh onions anymore. If you look at the world, the restaurants are not buying tomato and making paste out of it. So this is where it'll happen. I think there will be one stage of processing, and restaurants and retail chains will be buying semi-processed goods to cook at the last point. And this is where I think a lot of the savings could come in. That and this will also help because the ugly fruit will get utilized in the system. And as each step of the value chain becomes more professional, wastage will definitely reduce. But let me tell you one thing very clearly: just having a technology doesn't mean that we will reduce wastage. I will come back to my sweet point, like you said, on agriculture.
Right.
Even lots of people, in fact, I would say 99% of people think greenhouses are a success story in India. We've done a survey in Punjab, which will be validated for the rest of the country. 75% of greenhouses in India have failed. 75% of them. So there is a valid technology that's been validated the world over. Because the government is not investing in human resources, nobody is telling farmers that the application, that your agriculture practice needs to vary in open air and in a protected cultivation makes a difference. So the greenhouses have failed because they're not, for various reasons. We could go into that. But same way, there could be a lot of technologies to stop, to reduce wastage at the retail level, at the shop level, at the house level. I think so. At the heart of it is behavioral change. People need to ask, consumers need to ask questions of retail chains. They need to ask questions of restaurants. And I think that is very underestimated. This whole idea of behavioral change. It will help on people demanding more nutritious food, not having cereals. But definitely the semi-processed is, I think so, the way forward. Even if you look at small dhabas and stores or rediwalas now, a few of them are now buying stuff from back and getting it and selling it under their own brand. So I think that kind of industry is picking up in a big way.
Sure. Okay, great. That's nice. I love to bring conflict into the conversation, and that's what I've been trying to do many a times, and I think reasonably I've been successful. Let me put this question back to Devendra. And we got Ajay, who believes that technology is not the only savior, which is, I completely agree with that position of him. And there are many other policy-related and behavioral changes, which is very critical. Let me put this specifically, that how technologies like AI, ML, which you briefly touched upon, and what are the new things which are happening there, which is expected to help, in terms of reduction of food losses from a post-harvest standpoint?
I think there's a conflict. I agree with Ajay that the behavioral change is most important. I think the consumer need.
We're not able to hear
you
you.
guys. Yeah. Sorry, I think some network issue happened. So I think I agree with Ajay that behavioral change both on the consumer side and on the farmer side, or I think on the supply chain side is important to build the food system for tomorrow. And I think a lot of organizations need to come in who are not just providing this technology, but also focusing on how the farmers should be using it, educating them, driving awareness around that, piloting it in front of them, quite a bit of demonstrations, probably incentivizing as well. Like if you look at Flipkart, which came in India, and it was a very simple way to do it, of COD, cash on delivery, and the whole country started using Flipkart. And I think similarly, it definitely requires a large support from the government, also from the in terms of investors who are actually also looking to deploy a large amount of capital in the agri-tech space, so that the right kind of incentivization for farmers, for the supply chain players is getting created, and these kind of technologies they would be more open to trying out these technologies benefit from.
You're breaking off, Devendra. We're not able to
deliver
properly
what is required as an outcome from them. So I think it's a chicken and an egg situation, and I think it's a concerted process, and both need to go hand in hand to really make the needle move from where it is today to where we want it to be.
Okay, all right. I need to say that, Mr. Chandrasekhar has been a bit busy on a few other things, so I have actually sort of like helped him by not putting him in difficult situation through questions. So let me pass this question to Mr. Dr. Nachiket. We are around 14 minutes away from the closure of the program. From an academician standpoint and a person who is an industry expert, Dr. Nachiket, how do you think that we can bring this conflict together? One side, we have behavioral changes to be done. We have huge technology things which are running at this point in time. We have policymakers which needs to do things together. Now, and academicians have always shown the light in terms of driving things. What would be your insight to say that how we can bring an amalgamation of these things together, which can potentially be a one and one medicine to the whole thing? What is your thinking around it?
All right, thank you. In fact, I have a conflict with you that there is no conflict, frankly speaking. We are all looking at it from a different perspective. And frankly speaking, when we talk of technology is a tool, and it is for the people to be used. So what Mr. Jakhad is telling is absolutely right, that just giving technology to somebody is not sufficient. We have seen many times, many of our technologies, we get a feedback in single line. Ye kaam nahi karta hai. Nothing else. What doesn't work, why it doesn't work, nobody tells. It happens very, very often. And any new thing, when it comes to somebody, their first reaction is to kind of reject it, saying it doesn't work. But that make it very essential that with the technology, the training and empowering of the people, skill development and everything should go around along with that. You see, if you give a machine to somebody, it works for 1 year, 2 years, and after that, when it breaks down, who is going to repair it? So that is also another aspect that has to be seen when we see a complete infrastructure to be developed. If you say that the cold chain, cold truck is to be developed, or a cold storage is to develop, somebody needs to be around that cold storage, living around, who can repair it, who can make it functional. So all those things are also required to be looked at, and accordingly we need to have trained manpower to operate it and to use it appropriately. So this is one holistic view we have to take. Just developing a technology and just telling people that this is a technology is not sufficient. The knowledge has also to be imparted to the users. Without that, this particular thing is not going to help in any way.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nachiket. I think just being conscious of time, I'm going to go around the table one more time to take your closing remarks on the whole stuff, and then we'll open up for questions for that matter. So let me start with Sudhir. I mean, your closing remarks on the topic itself. Sudhir, are you able to?
As you see, as Mr. Nachiket said, there's no conflict. Everybody is interested in avoiding the food wastage and losses. But dono haath se taali bajti hai. So you need, like, farmer and technology has to combine together with, the combining part should be the government to combine the technology, or with the technologist and the farmer government. I rightly take, like, mega food parks are not a success, but at the same,
You are actually breaking off, Sudhir.
and fruits in cold storages and processing it. Like, you take the example of French fries, etc. Earlier days we used to import. Now the farmer is getting a better value for potatoes, good quality potatoes grown as per their requirements. So it is like you have to combine both technology. At the same time, farmer should be educated and government should play the middle role to engage both of them. So this will definitely avoid losses. And as you rightly said, not only the food losses at the harvest side, even on the consumer side and the retail side, people need to know that there are a lot of people who are not with food. So wastage in the table or in the retail thing, that also needs to be looked at. That behavioral change has to happen.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you, Sudhir, for that one, for the closing remarks. I love the behavioral part of the story with Ajay mentioned, because that's a fundamental change which we require, starting from children or families, the generation to build that one through. Considering that one, and Ajay, your last remarks on this one, please.
I have no remarks to give. I've run short of ideas. So I think I'll give time to other people who've got much better ideas than me.
All right, okay. All right, great. Let me pass it on to Devendra then.
So I think we have already summarized most of the points, and I think the consensus is the same, that the technology needs to be transferred effectively, and I think some support is needed in terms of awareness creation. If that awareness creation can come in two ways, with the government really going about and driving that. You've seen the Prime Minister convincing all of us to wear masks in a short period of 7 days and disciplining the whole country. I think not whole of it, but at least a large part of it. I think if those kind of initiatives can be taken up by the government in creating awareness, I think that could be very helpful to address this particular issue. And I think the second aspect remains is in private sector to believe and invest immensely to drive this behavioral change. I think, that would be my 2 comments.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Devendra. And let me pass to Dr. Nachiket now. Your parting comments,
Yes.
Dr. Nachiket.
Okay. My final comments would be, there are 5 points that I have just now written down. Number 1 is curb losses. Curb losses, use appropriate technology, use appropriate inputs. And in the food sector, we say that the losses are occurring just because of 3 things. You have to control 3 things: air, moisture, and temperature. So these 3 things have to be controlled at every place, whether you use refrigerator, whether you use appropriate packaging, or you dry material. So this way you can reduce the losses. Appropriate technology is to be required. That comes with education also. That when technology is taken, it should be taken in an appropriate sense. Minimal processing is one of the things which has been, I'm using a word differently, but this has been said by other speakers also, that this is one of the things that will go between our demand for fresh material and at some kind of processing. So some minimal processing can be taken up. Then other part is that whatever is left or whatever is of low value, that can be converted into high value products. So that is another agenda that we are working on, so that it motivates the farmer or the producer or the handling people in between to separate out those things and then take out something valuable from that. Primary processing on farm, I have been from beginning itself, I have been saying. But at the same time, we understand that these type of machines, which are used once in a year, maybe, or once in a season, everybody cannot afford it. So there could be a custom hiring model or some kind of model with the government subsidies or government support. It could be installed where one can hire these machines at the farm, get the work done, and then give it away. This has been quite successful in case of farm machineries, and maybe we have to see that in the primary processing sector also, these type of models can be taken up. And now mobile telephone is one of the very good devices. So for spreading of knowledge, these type of things have to be used very effectively. So these are some of the points which I would like.
Thank you, Dr. Nachiket. I don't think that there's any better way in terms of summarizing the whole piece of stuff what has been discussed. So thanks for that one. Let me open up the floor in terms of, we got some important personalities around here and anybody who's hearing it as well. If there are any questions to the panel, we would be more than happy to facilitate that one. Maiji, Reviji, whoever it is, and other people who are hearing it, any questions, feel free to ask. We got a decent 5 minutes to go in, and I'm sure that we can have some quick fire answers from the experts at this point in time.
I think Dr. Mai is mute.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I must first thank Ajay, because I insisted that Ajay should be here around. And I know his views have always been very straightforward. He's a very good friend of mine. Ajay, one thing you must tell me now, that do you agree that there are opportunities? Because the question is, everybody said that there are opportunities, but I find that there are more hurdles than opportunities exist in this food sector. From a farmer's perspective, I always feel that we need the technologies. Definitely, there is no doubt. We need food processing. But how long government can really support it unless we come some kind of public-private partnership in this program? If you look into USA, nearly 30 to 40% food is being processed. Today, our problem is surplus management, and one of the issues is that we must at least help through this food processing. Another is the habits of the people. There's another big problem for eating these. I wanted your opinion, as really do we feel that India can grow in the next few years in this particular sector?
Sir, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for inviting me today and for all the other events that you keep inviting me. And it's a learning experience. I personally think we'll never be able to reach 40% processing like the United States, because the percentage of population which is involved in growing that food is only less than 2% of the United States population. And we have very small farms. There's going to be a lot of consumption of the produce made that will be consumed on the farm itself. And second thing is, processing does not increase. It require it. So initially, if you look at what the food processing ministry would think, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was that what does not get eaten will get processed. And Dr. Mai Sahab, you have been in research, you have been in charge, you have had the responsibility of picking up scientists, you have had the responsibility of making people who are now leading policy today. But let me just tell you, as a farmer, I feel disappointed with the quality of scientists we have today, because as a farmer,
it's my mistake.
No, sir, it's not your mistake. But now that you say that, you initially said that I speak the truth, but we do not have any processing varieties. I grow citrus, I grow quinoa. My grandfather put the first citrus orchard in 1954 in my village, 1954, which is nearly 70 years old. But we are still growing the same citrus. There are 500 varieties of mangoes, only 2 get processed. And are there enough quantities of that processable variety? I think the linkage between research and industry is missing. And that is one key difference. So you may have a technology to process, but where is the material to process? And once, I want to give an anecdote here, which I've quoted earlier. Siraj Hussain ji, who's like a mentor and a friend for me, he was food processing secretary. He once called me to his office when he was secretary food processing, and he says, Ajay, you always keep criticizing us. What do you think we're doing wrong? And he called the officers of his department. So it was out of the blue. I thought he'd call me for a cup of tea, and then he posed this question to me. On return, I asked one question: how many times have the ministry officials of the food processing ministry have met scientists or officials of Indian Council of Agriculture Research? They said, why should we meet them? And that is the heart of the problem, that the research is missing, for processable varieties, for processing sector to take off.
But Ajay, one thing now, as because we said, now the ICAR and all universities have changed the concept from quality to quantity to quality. And I think
Sir,
yesterday, but we had discussion.
Sir, sorry for saying
And
this.
also,
Sir, sorry for interrupting. 50% तो स्टाफ ही नहीं है उनके पास, क्या रिसर्च करेंगे? आप मेरे को एक यूनिवर्सिटी बता दो जो बेसिक रिसर्च कर रही हो. आप मेरे को एक फूड प्रोसेसिंग इंडस्ट्री बता दो जो बेसिक रिसर्च कर रही हो. Even the industry is not doing basic research. They're just copy pasting Western models, buying technology from there and looking at it. Till we don't invest in research and human resources, we will not succeed.
I think in your first the food system, I draw your attention to this fact. That
yes, sir.
We are lacking.
Sir,
basically, हमारे यहाँ वैज्ञानिकों को जब तक हम कीमत नहीं देंगे, शास्त्रज्ञों को कीमत नहीं देंगे, तब हमारा देश कैसे सुधरेगा? First, we have to respect scientists in this country. ये तो बहुत बुरा हाल है नहीं तो हमारा. I fully agree with that. But now it's all change is occurring. That the breeding procedures अभी जो है वो processing के लिए, particularly in vegetables, I find a lot of change has occurred. So that's a good. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Maiji. I think that we are running off time at the moment. I should, if there is no further questions, then I should actually call for a closure of the session. And I'd like to thank each one of you for giving time for this session and very passionate discussion. I tried my level best to bring in conflict, which was my job. And I think that
excellent.
and I think that we tried doing that for that matter. And I should thank everyone again. And we would meet again for that matter. So I pass it on back to Vibha for the rest of the proceedings. Thank you, everyone.
So you will be our permanent moderator now, future.
Thank you, Shri Dharanji, for moderating this session so wonderfully, and we really appreciate it. And thank you all the speakers once again. And now we have Mr. Ravi Baratkar also. I really want to hear his comments now that 2 days we deliberated. So what does he have to say? Mr. Baratkar, can you hear me?
Yes,
and after that, I will call Dr. C.T. Mai for his vote of thanks. But I would like to hear your comments first.
Okay, it's good. That before Dr. C.D. Mai concludes it, I will just like to say a few things. See, in all, totally, we had one inaugural session and I think almost 6 technical sessions. I will not get into the details because that Dr. Mai may like to conclude, but I will just bring about some of the action points for AgroSpectrum and Agrovision I find we could get in this 2 days deliberation. First and foremost, I think when when we were listening to Dr. Sodhi, Managing Director of Amul, when he was talking about the marketing and exports problem about this processed food, the first and foremost he said that there needs to be more such, kind of organized interactions to be organized to help maybe those who are existing or those who will be coming now in the Atmanirbhar Bharat and new companies, vocal for local, all those food processing or agro processing units coming up, they will need for marketing more such interactions. So that is one action point as far as Agrovision and AgroSpectrum is concerned. Second was when we are talking about the food parks. We all know it's a wonderful idea, but somehow still struggling to get a success. And what we could get from the various food park owners who are already operating, they strongly feel that there has to be a little more flexibility from the policymakers so that to achieve the basic objective, things can be worked out. But even during the inaugural session, what Mr. Nitin Gadkari also said, and rather he appealed to the Minister of Food Processing and Industries, to Mr. Narendra Singh Tomar, that he should also meet all these food park owners together. And during the session of food park also, there was voice raised that there needs to be some common platform through which their voices can be raised. So I think here, this is one place where AgroSpectrum and Agrovision can try to bridge this gap and can take initiative to form a platform or to a bridge between, to bring them together on a common thing and put a proper narratives with the policymakers. The third, which was also raised by Mr. Jakad now, that we have to have a better linkages between the research and academia. Similarly, when we are talking about the technology session, in that also this point strongly came up. The industry feels that they need to have a better access to the resources of the either universities or research institute, so that they can afford to do the innovation or bring in new technology in their products. At the same time, Ananda Krishnan said that from IIFPT that there are so many technologies they have developed, which are very relevant, but industry must come forward for commercialization of the same. So I feel here is one action point for us, that we need to take an initiative so that this gap can be bridged, so that we can see how we can bring together industry and academia more closer to work in such a way that this gap is bridged as far as possible. So I think with naming these three initiatives, there are many more, but I think we are at the closing end, and I would like Dr. Mai to conclude. So I thought these are the major things which came to my mind, and with this, it's on to Dr. Mai now for your vote of thanks and concluding the session.
Thank you, Ravi. I am audible?
Yeah.
Viva? Okay. First of all, let me thank on behalf of Agrovision Foundation, AgroSpectrum, and MMActiv, would like to really first thank the Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Narendra Singh Tomar, who is the Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, as well as he has so many other charges, rural development and processing. We would like to really thank him because of his even this time, is pretty busy time. He has taken out time and guided us. Yes. And also would like to thank our mentor, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who has been the president for the inaugural session, and who has very clearly, he has concepts are very clear as to what needs to be done in this sector. And as I think Ravi Boratkar has said, it was very clearly pointed out that there are some challenges and there are some issues for which we need to have a special meeting with all the people together. I think I must thank both of them who have done the inaugural session in such a wonderful manner that the ball started rolling into all these 6 technical sessions. I think I would also like to acknowledge that this is the first Agrovision Foundation online exhibition which has been put up as a virtual exhibition. And this I call it as a corona effect. Otherwise, we would have definitely met, because every year Agrovision Foundation conducts a seminar, but this year, because we are delayed because of corona, we thought of virtual exhibition. But this was, let me tell you, was a very grand success due to sponsorship from many organizations. I would like to first thank supporting organizations, particularly MEDC, Maharashtra Economic Development Council, and MSME Ministry, who have supported this entire event. ITC being our gold sponsor, we would like to have specially thank them for the gesture that they have shown. Also, they have participated in our seminar, our technical sessions also, give their experiences in the this particular sector. We are also grateful to Nath Biology, Superb Techno Engineering, Manage, Cremica Food Park, Gujarat Agro Infrastructure Mega Food Park, IIFPT, NIFTEM, ICAR, IIHR, and also APEDA, who have been our exhibitors in this particular session, this particular 2 days virtual meeting. I am particularly we are grateful to all our speakers. I think there are more than 35 speakers. I think you already heard the last session was a very vibrant session with Mr. Shri, who conducted it in a very nice way and gave technical information to almost in all the 6 technical sessions. The summit discussed several issues. First, I started with opportunities in food processing, whether they exist or whether they do not exist. We also talked about what are the issues of safety and food processing. Then issues of marketing export, because what I feel that it's a chain of everything, because we have to discuss in a totality. Even we have discussed about food machinery, it's a very important component. And also we have, last session was on the what we call the food wastages, which is also an important part. And I think therefore I would like specially thank all the speakers. I may not be able to name all of them, but I would like to really thank the speakers who have been from both government side, private side, those who are from NGO side. They all came together, and this is, I think, a very wonderful opportunity to interact. And that platform, I think, was this virtual exhibition, virtual summit. I would especially thank the moderators, because the main job was given to them to really put up the flow chart, how to questionnaires and then interaction in a very nice way in each technical segment. Particularly Mr. Bhagirat Chaudhary, Diti Chawla and Mr. Pradeep Sridharan, who have done a wonderful job for their own session. Finally, I would like to really a marvelous job done by our Agrovision team, AgroSpectrum team, MMActiv team. I think I should not forget Vibha, who has done a lot of trouble she has taken, and she has been rather mentoring everything. Even she was telling me every time phoning what is to be done and how it is. I must say that each of our members have done really very hard work to see that this particular summit is a success. Kindly give big hands to everybody, and thanks all of them. Thank you very much, Vibha. I think we conclude by this. Once again, I wish all speakers and all of these people to meet once again, because this is not the end of food processing. This is the beginning of food processing in the country. And as I often said, we may not reach 40%, but at least we have to reach 20-25% food processing. Then only the farmers' problems can be solved to some extent. I think this is my feeling, and I'm sure, as I was talking about surplus management, this is one issue which can be managed in the surplus. Thank you very much. I am passing on to Vibha. Vibha, any comments further, or should we now go?
No, thank you very much, sir, for your concluding remarks. I just want to inform everyone who are listening to us that exhibition will be on for the next 30 days. So they can come on to our platform anytime to visit our exhibitors, and they can interact with them for the next 30 days. So the virtual platform will be activated for the next 30 days. Thank you very much once again. You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Boratkar. We can't hear you.
I said one more announcement. It's important, a sort of repetition, but we are still hopeful to do the Agrovision this year. It is now scheduled between 5th to 8th February 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.